The screams in the asylum. In the heart of a desolate forest, hidden from prying eyes, stood the crumbling remains of Blackwood Asylum. For decades, it had been abandoned, whispered about in hushed tones by locals who claimed to hear screams carried on the wind at night. No one dared to go near it until now. The dare. Jess, a thrill-seeking urban explorer, had always scoffed at ghost stories. When her friends dared her to spend a night in Blackwood Asylum, she laughed, packed her camera, flashlight, and a sturdy pair of boots, and set off. The sun was setting as she approached the imposing gates, rusted and overgrown with vines. The building loomed like a shadow, its windows dark and empty, like hollow eyes staring into her soul. The wind howled through broken panes, carrying faint whispers that could almost be words. She shrugged off the unease and stepped inside. The entrance. The air inside was heavy, carrying the scent of mold and decay. Her flashlight beam illuminated peeling paint, graffiti scrawled by past trespassers, and old gurneys tipped over in the halls. A patient chart lay on the floor, yellowed with age, its ink smudged but still legible. Patient number 22, status, uncontrollable. She picked it up and felt a chill creep up her spine as a faint sound echoed through the corridor. A shuffle? Or was it just the wind? She brushed it off and kept moving, recording everything. Her footsteps echoed, but there was something off. They weren't the only sounds. The first encounter. As she explored deeper, she found the main ward. Rows of rusty beds were lined up like soldiers, their frames twisted and decayed. Her flashlight caught movement, a shadow darting between the beds. She froze. "Hello," she called, her voice trembling. No response. Suddenly, there was a loud clang behind her. She spun around, her flashlight shaking, only to see a bed slowly rocking back and forth. Her heart thundered in her chest as she stepped closer. As she reached out to stop the bed, a high-pitched scream pierced the silence, echoing through the asylum. Her flashlight flickered and died. Darkness swallowed her. The descent. Panic surged through her as she fumbled for her spare batteries. The whispers returned, louder this time, coming from every direction. "Leave, now," they hissed. Her hands shook as she slapped new batteries into the flashlight. When the light returned, she was no longer alone. In the corner of the room stood a figure. It wore a tattered hospital gown, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the beam of her light. It took a step toward her, and Jess bolted, her scream echoing through the halls. The maze. She ran blindly through the labyrinth of corridors, the sound of footsteps pursuing her. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing colder with every step. Doors slammed shut on their own, forcing her to change direction. Her flashlight caught glimpses of things, figures watching her from the shadows, hands reaching out from the walls. She stumbled into the basement, the air thick with an overpowering stench of rot. The door slammed shut behind her, and she heard the faint click of a lock. She was trapped. The revelation. In the basement, she found rows of padded cells. The whispers grew louder, merging into a chorus of tortured screams. In one cell, she found a source, an ancient record player spinning on its own, emitting a distorted symphony of wails. Her flashlight flickered again, and when it steadied, she saw words scrawled on the walls in blood. "Patient number 22 watches." Her flashlight beam caught movement at the end of the hallway, a tall figure, its limbs unnaturally long, its face obscured by a veil of greasy hair. It stood motionless, but as soon as she took a step back, it began to sprint toward her, its feet pounding the floor like thunder. The jump. She screamed and turned to run, but the basement shifted. It was as if the walls themselves were alive, twisting and reshaping into a maze with no escape. The figure's footsteps grew louder, its breath hot on her neck. She glanced back. Bad decision. Its face was inches from hers, its mouth an endless void filled with darkness and teeth. She tripped and fell hard, her flashlight skidding away. In the dim light, she saw the figure crawl toward her on all fours, its joints cracking and popping with every movement. It whispered her name in a guttural voice, Jess. In sheer desperation, she scrambled for the flashlight, grabbed it, and swung it wildly. The light struck the creature's face, and it let out an ear-splitting shriek, recoiling into the shadows. The escape. Jess ran blindly, her lungs burning, her mind racing. She found a set of stairs and clawed her way up, bursting through a rusted door into the open air. The cold night wind hit her face, and she collapsed on the ground, sobbing and gasping for breath. When she looked back, the asylum was dark and silent, as if mocking her. But as she stumbled away, she heard the faint sound of footsteps behind her, and a whisper that sent chills through her soul, "You can't leave, yet." The aftermath. Jess made it back to her car, shaking and covered in scratches. She swore never to speak of what happened. But when she reviewed the footage from her camera later, her blood ran cold. In every frame, behind her, was the figure. Watching. Waiting. And then, at the very end, it smiled.